This episode of The Rookie Hunter is sponsored by North Arm Knives. North Arm Knives are handcrafted and sold directly through a father and son team right here in British Columbia. Choose from a selection of outdoor knives, kitchen knives, and the brand new folding knife from northarmknives.com. They ship internationally and guarantee all their work. Callie and I use their products and give them our stamp of approval. Go to northarmknives.com. Hey guys, welcome to episode 39. Today on the show we have Danny Coyne from BC Fishin, and we're going to be talking all about kokanee fishing. So the interesting thing about fishing, especially when we talk to guys like Brian Chan and Danny, is that you can make fishing simple. You can keep it simple. You can just toss a rod out there with some bait and cross your fingers and hope you get a bite. Or you can take it to a whole other level, which these guys have. And I find it very fascinating, and Kelly's very much into fishing, so we really enjoyed this episode with Danny and learned a lot from it, so hopefully you guys do as well. I was short on time, so unfortunately we had to keep this one rather tight for time, but I think we got enough in there, and we're definitely going to have Danny back to talk fishing and other species. So anyways, hope you guys enjoy this one. As always, please check out our website. It's theRookieHunter.com. If you want to help us out, you can donate to the show. There's a donate button on our website. While we're talking about donations, I would like to dedicate this episode to Mark from Vancouver. We very much appreciate your support, so this episode is for you, my friend. If you don't have any spare change, that's totally cool. You can help us out by leaving a rating or review on iTunes, and I know it's kind of a pain, but it helps us out. So please consider doing that. We do appreciate it. As I mentioned on the last episode, we're going to do an Ask Us Anything, so we want you guys to submit questions over the next week here, and we're going to do a special fun episode that we're looking forward to. So send your questions to the Rookie Hunter Podcast at gmail.com, or if you're browsing around on the website, there's a contact form on there as well. From here, you know what to do. Sit back, relax, crack a cold beer, and enjoy episode 39 with Danny Coyne. So cool. I think this is, I think we're at episode 38 now.
Yeah.
I keep losing track, but
I'm trusting you.
We're approaching the big number 40 coming up here. This is actually the second podcast we've done today, and we've got another guest. The last one was on Skype, but it's always nice to have somebody in the studio. So today we've got Danny Coyne from BC Fishin. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, man. If you don't mind, just give us a bit of your background, where you grew up, and what you do here in the Okanagan.
Yeah, for sure. My background is, I grew up in a small town of Princeton, British Columbia.
Nice.
Yeah, my family goes quite a ways back in the history of that town. Like the 6th or 7th generation growing up there. So
Wow.
One of the nice things about growing up there is you grow up with rod and gun in hand. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of tell a little bit about BC Fishin' a little bit, and how it became, because growing up in a small town and kind of what we took for granted, we brought to the big city. So when my wife and I first moved to Kelowna in 2004, she's from the Kootenays, from Cranbrook, and I was living out there with her.
Yep.
And we grew up, or when we moved out here, we're like, hey, let's find some people to go fishing with. So I started asking around, and people are like, well, I don't really fish. And I said, what do you mean you don't fish? I'm like, you're in your 30s, you don't fish? I don't know if I trust you or not. And what we found really quick was a lot of people want to learn about fishing. They were interested in about it. But unfortunately, in our age, mom and dad both had to go to work. And because of that, they didn't actually have mentors to take them out and teach them. So we thought, hey, what a better way to take people fishing than to teach them at the same time. And at that time, my brother was actually building websites, building blog sites. And he says, Danny, why don't I make you a website? Because you can put down some of your fishing expeditions and some of your tips. I'm like, wow, I'm not really too much of a writer, but sure, let's give it a try. So I put out one or two articles a week. And then I remember the 4th week, it was 1 month almost to the date, I opened up my inbox and I had over 50 emails, people emailing me and asking me questions.
Wow.
Nice.
And I'm like, wow, there's something here. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are interested in learning. So at that point, it's like anything else, is when you start to teach, you also learn a lot for yourself, right? So BC Fishin, I quickly found out I can't do this on my own if we're going to reach, I have a very one side of angling, and a lot of it's big lake trolling and such as that. And so I had to reach out to my other fellow anglers that had really good experience in fly fishing and such. So we created this team called the BC Fishin team, and it's a group of anglers that are scattered all throughout British Columbia with all different levels of angling. And but everything that we do, we have conservation first in mind, and that's
Right.
what we really try to talk about. So BC Fishin is really, it's a website geared towards promoting the sport of fishing, but with conservation first in mind. Absolutely.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were looking at your website. I've been on there quite a few times because
good.
I'm relatively new to the whole trolling world. But on your About Us page, we did notice that there's a lot of missions and core values around conservation and teaching and learning. And Mike and I kind of realized that it's actually very similar to what, some of the values we have on this show as well.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's good to hear for
We're
sure.
trying to, incorporate the teaching side of things, but Kelly and I aren't that experienced. But we're trying to take that same approach as like using this as a platform to hopefully inspire and teach others and stuff like that through talking to people like you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. I really enjoy your podcast, and we do share a lot of the same values and such. We really not only do we write and such, but we're also really community involved. So we've teamed up with groups such as an organization such as the BC Wildlife Federation, local fishing games clubs, Sport Fishing Advisory Committee of the DFO, the Okanagan Fisheries Foundation. Those are all organizations that I became very, very active in because actually there was a turning point in my fishing, I guess, career, you can say, is that Wood Lake, which is a very, very popular kokanee fishery here in the Okanagan, a few years back, it crashed. And I remember being on the water that day when my wife and I were trolling along, and I know my catch rates and I know where we should be. And when I looked over at it, I'm like, something's not right. So anyways, we trolled all day and didn't catch a fish. And the next day I came to work and I looked at the Kelowna Capital News, and there was the big heading from Judy Steve's kokanee crash in Wood Lake. So it put off a kind of a spark in my mind and a wake up call saying, hey, this is a resource that's not just always going to be there. And it's really, as anglers and hunters, it's our duty to give back to that resource and make sure we put in effort. So I picked up the phone right away, called Judy Steves, the author of that article, and she got me in contact with a gentleman named Rick Simpson at the Osceola Fishing Game Club. And from there, I just grabbed on and it says, for every hour I put in angling, I should be putting an hour in within conservation efforts.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think we're at that turning point right now where we're starting to realize the issues that are in front of us here in BC. And I think we've said this a number of times that I think the general public isn't necessarily aware of what is going on out there. We've got both dogs in the studio here creating havoc. So, yeah, I think it's very important for those who are involved with, hunting or angling or just being outdoors, that you do your part, whatever that might be.
Well, exactly. And the more people that you get engaged into the sport of fishing and in the hunting and such, the more awareness there is about the resource. So, if no one knew about how good that Wood Lake kokanee fishery was, we would not have gotten the grant money to study that lake, the water flows, to get that kokanee fishery to bounce back.
True.
So playing a role of education, getting people engaged, just like this podcast, like our website, bcfishing.com, it plays a big role in it. And my only thing when I tell people how to, my tips and such, is that tell other people, tell them the right way of doing things and share your knowledge, because that's what's going to happen is more people are going to create awareness towards our resources.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah.
I find in hunting, it can be a little tough to do that because you start, you have your secret spots but I mean, as far as tactics and what you learn out there and stuff, I agree. We should be sharing all that.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Yeah, with the lake, there's the lake. The fish are in there.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm gonna tell you tips and techniques, but you got to find them. But hunting, you got a lot more ground to cover. Yeah, I ain't gonna tell you where my blind's set up. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, yeah, you guys are doing great for sure.
You.
Yeah, definitely. So, Danny, you came with some gifts here, but I think you want to backtrack a little bit before we get too far into kokanee fishing, which is going to be sort of most of what we're talking about today, I think. So
yeah, absolutely. It's mid-spring. This is kokanee season.
Yeah.
The lakes are opened up and the kokanee are getting active, and now it's the time to hit them. So why don't I take you guys through the basics of it?
Yeah, please do.
The first thing is like anything else, when you're going to target any type of fish, or when you're hunting, you got to understand a little bit of the basic biology of the fish. So kokanee, they are truly just a landlocked sockeye salmon. A long time ago, when the glaciers came through, ripped out our landscape, they created these lakes, trapping sockeye salmon in them, and kokanee created their home. So kokanee will average between 3 to 5 years of maturity. Then they'll go up and they'll spawn, unless they're a triploid. They'll go up, they'll spawn, and they'll die. So the great thing about kokanee is they're a fickle little fish. They're a little moody little fish that I call them. They're the aggressive little bulldogs of the water. Okay, there's nothing that we present as a kokanee angler, really. 99% of our gear that we present to them is not something that we are feeding to the fish. What we're trying to do is we're trying to entice them to get angry, get irritated, to attack our gear. Okay. The cool thing about kokanee too is that they're schooling fish. So once you get into one, you can turn right back around and you can really limit out really quick if you know what you're doing. So kokanee, first of all, they're really water sensitive to, they're really sensitive to water temperatures. And that's really important for anglers to know, is because that's where it'll help you find where the fish are. Because sometimes you can roll up to a big lake like a Kalamalka Lake or a Wood Lake or such and go, okay, where do I even start? So in the early spring right now, kokanee really prefer water temperatures between 43 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit. I use Fahrenheit because sonars, that's usually what they have on there. Yeah. So that's what we speak on. Fahrenheit, and then we'll talk about miles per hour on trolling speeds. So knowing that those kokanee prefer those temperatures between that 43 to 53, 54 degrees Fahrenheit, it gives you an idea where to start. So in the springtime, right now, our water surface temperature, the other day we were out there, and it was 51 degrees Fahrenheit. That was on a nice sunny day. Okay. Well, the kokanee are pretty happy right now. They're up on top of the surface because that water temperature is there. Their food source, which is mainly zooplankton, isn't really established so much yet throughout the water column, because it takes a lot of photosynthesis to create phytoplankton, which will bloom up, which creates a whole bunch of zooplankton inside. And those are small little crustaceans in the water that kokanee will eat using their gill rakers. But in the early season like this, they'll be usually feeding in on small little bugs and larvae and such. And that's why we're finding them a little bit up higher in the water column. The water temperature is decent for them, so they can be up higher. And they'll also be found in the shorelines. For fly guys ask me, can you go catch kokanee on the fly? Absolutely. This is the time of year to do it, because when the chironomids are hatching in the shallow bays and such, calorie to calorie, kokanee are happy when they can actually feed in on these chironomids.
Right.
Once the lake starts to stratify and it starts to actually create our thermocline in the lake, and the water temperatures start to increase on the surface, those kokanee are going to go to the middle of the lake. They're going to get about mid-level to about anywhere in our lakes, they're usually between 35 to about 55 feet deep. But in the springtime, which is really good for anglers, is because you can actually target these fish right on the surface, which means you don't need all the fancy equipment like downriggers. So guys can go out in a little 12-foot tinner, run out 100, 150 feet of line, troll right on the surface, and you're going to get good results. Okay.
Yep.
But the thing I was saying is, like, as the water temperature warms up, those fish are going to go back into the thermocline of the lake, into the deeper water. They're following their food source, and they're also wanting that temperature. One of the best tips that someone ever gave me was to take a thermometer and tie it up onto my downrigger ball and run my thermometer down on my downrigger ball to find that 53 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll tell you, I've caught more fish. Yes, they may be marking in different areas, but where the active fish are is at 53 degrees Fahrenheit. So I always carry a little thermometer on my downrigger.
Nice.
So you just drop it down, yank it back up, test it,
you
drop
betcha.
it down.
Just got one of those little avalanche thermometers from Mountain Equipment Co-op.
Yeah.
Ties on my downrigger ball. I quickly rip it up, look at it. Yep, we're at 53. I know I'm in the right zone.
Right.
Everything's happy down there. Lots of oxygen and such. The other thing about kokanee is that I call them, they're the canaries of the coal mine. Okay, so they're the first fish species in our lake that are going to be affected by anything that tips in the lake of environmental changes. So if we start to see a kokanee crash where kokanee start to kill off, they start to die off, that's usually a triggering point that something in that water system is not healthy. That could be, over algae blooms and such, blue-green algae blooms, which is really deadly, or even it's called something called lake squeeze. And what lake squeeze is that the top layer of your lake, that's called your mixed layer. As our temperatures warm up, it'll drive that temperature down, that warmer temperature down closer and closer and closer to that thermocline. Well, these fish, they cannot actually go further down past into the deep zone of the lake into where the dissolved oxygen levels aren't as high. So what happens is, think of it's literally sandwiching this fish into that thermocline. And all of a sudden, if those fish get exposed to over 60 degrees Fahrenheit for a long period of time, it can actually be quite deadly for them. So that's really important for anglers to understand, is because these fish do not handle catch and release very well. In fact, we always recommend anglers when they're going to go pursue kokanee fishing is just to go out kokanee fishing casual and fulfill your table fare appetite, but don't fill your freezer type of thing.
Right.
But don't catch and release them either, because if
they have really soft mouths too, right?
Right. The reason why they have soft mouths is that kokanee will grow really quickly. They're one of the fastest growing fish, the sport fish that we have. And so what's happened is their cartilage in their mouth can't keep up with the growth. So as you catch them in the springtime when they're growing immensely, the soft mouths will come off.
Okay.
Or sorry, it'll rip out of the soft mouth. So in the summertime, when you're pulling kokanee up out of 50 feet of water, they're in that happy zone. But when you're bringing them up through that mixed layer that can be 70, 80, we've seen 80 plus degrees Fahrenheit on our surface temperatures, that fish has a 99.9% mortality rate.
Right.
So, but also too, on the flip side is understanding that if they're in a mid to late season, those fish are going to be banded in that thermocline in a good about 20-foot layer, and you just run your downringer ball through there, and guess what? You're going to catch a lot of fish. Right. So our kokanee gear, really what it consists of is there's two types of terminal tackle that you need to use to make an effective kokanee presentation. One is some sort of flasher dodger, something that's going to create a lot of displacement. So a dodger, which is anywhere, it's a 4 to 6 inch dodger is what you want to use. It's going to move side to side in the water. It's creating two things: creating a lot of flash. It's also creating a lot of thump underneath the water, in which those kokanee will actually feel in their air bladder and their lateral line. So the dodger is what's going to call the kokanee in. So when the fish are scattered out, you run your dodger through. They're going to kind of hone in. They can feel that. They look around. They see a big flash. They think it's another fish or something coming through their personal space. They're going to come up to it. And then the second piece of equipment that we have, or tackle we have, is your lure. Now, there are more kokanee lures out there these days and dodgers than what women have options for shoes. Okay, and I'll be the first one to say that I have an addiction when it comes to buying kokanee gear. The thing is that the lure itself is what seals the deal. Okay, it's what ticks them off. So kokanee will literally follow your gear, and I've had this on video footage. They'll follow it for miles until something changes. So they'll get right behind your lure. It'll be going side to side or such, and all of a sudden something will change and that kokanee will attack it. They're not attacking a hoochie or a spinner because it looks like something they're eating. They're microfeeders. They're not feeding in on that.
Yeah, we actually I went out last weekend, and at one point, I'm trolling along and I get a little bite. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're getting some action. 10 seconds later, another little bite. And then I started thinking, okay, I'm going to start slowing down and speeding up and let's knock the motor and turn it back on. And then 30 seconds later, a minute later, boom. It felt like it was the same fish, just kind of playing with it the whole time.
Oh, and absolutely. Sometimes they'll follow it, they'll hit it, they'll turn right back around and hit it again.
Yeah.
And then they'll follow it for another 5 minutes until you do something different, they'll hit it again. Yeah. And then that's, and hopefully you'll seal the deal with getting them on.
Yeah. Well, he actually stripped all the bait off my...
Oh, did he?
He did have a pretty hard bite, though. I thought I had him, but no. Sometimes it's a little luck.
Yeah, and they definitely have a distinct roll to them. So when they bite, a kokanee is used to looking behind their back. Let's face it, guys. The kokanee, like I have a lot of respect for these little fish because they're cruising around their environment and they're always looking behind their back because they're one of the main forage fish for rainbow trout and any type of char.
Right.
Like a large adult mature rainbow trout will eat an average of 2 full-grown kokanee in a day.
Wow.
A lake,
And if you're trolling rainbow, you're kind of matching the plugs or the colors to the kokanee at the time, right?
Exactly. So that comes up to another good point is actually when you're choosing your dodgers, your flashers, and what you're using, you got to be really careful that you're not mimicking a predator fish coming in their zone, right? So like we'll use 2 lakes in our area. One as an example is Kalamalka Lake. We know that there's 30 plus pound lake trout in that lake. Using a flasher that's 6 inches size or even greater is actually going to mimic to them like, hey, that's a big fish coming my way. That's a predator. I better get out of here. You can take that same dodger and you can go up to Monty Lake, which is a stock triploid kokanee fishery. They don't know any difference. Because there's not that many large predators. So I can use almost up to an 8-inch dodger in that lake and get results where if I'm fishing in Kalamalka Lake, I'm actually downsizing. I'm using 4-inch, sometimes even smaller of a dodger, on the line to get the results. Right.
Interesting.
So that's why they can bend, like they roll in a way that no other fish fights, is because they can literally bend their nose, their snout, they're almost right back to their dorsal fin, because they're used to looking behind them. That gives them that distinct roll.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So to get back onto the lure, is that one of the biggest, I guess, pitfalls I find guys do is they tie their leaders to the lures way too long, or they don't understand the type of lure that they're using. I mean, we could sit here all day, and like I said, I've got more kokanee gear than my wife has shoes. But really what it comes down to is there's 2 types of categories of kokanee lures. There's a lure that creates its own action, which is side-to-side action, or there's a lure that runs straight through the water, like a spinner or just a hoochie. So when you're using a lure that has its own action, side-to-side action, it's important that you're going to run your leader long enough from your dodger that the dodger action is not going to interrupt the action of the lure. Okay. So here's a quick, simple little formula that everyone can use to follow it. No matter what type of dodger you're using, if you're using a 4-inch or a 6-inch dodger, you want to use 3.5 to 4 times the length of your dodger of a leader to your lure that has its own action. That will give you adequate leader length without interrupting the action. And it's not putting your gear so far back from your dodger that the fish won't be attracted into.
Right.
If the lure doesn't have its own action, and again, a spinner, like a wedding ring spinner, will fall into this category because it's not going side to side, it's going straight through.
Or just a straight hoochie.
Straight hoochie, yep.
Yeah.
Those you want to actually bring them up a lot tighter, because what you're going to do is you're going to actually transfer that action from your dodger over to the lure. Now, there's a formula on this too as well. That's really easy, which is a good starting point. When the water temperature is less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, what you're going to want to run is you're going to run 2.5 to 3 times the length of the dodger. And once the water temperature is over 50 degrees, you want to go from 2 to 2.5 times the length of your dodger. Okay. So keeping those in mind. So that's just a quick little reference on when you're on the boat, go, hey, I'm going to retie a piece of gear. Look at your water temperature. Hey, we're at 55 or we're even at 70 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface. These fish are active. I can actually tie up a shorter leader. Some days, no kidding, we will actually tie up 6-inch leaders to our 4-inch dodger, and we'll still catch fish. Yeah, it's because what we're trying to do is we're trying to irritate them, entice them into getting erratic and want them to attack our gear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing that is kind of overseen a lot by some anglers is the use of scent. Scent is so very important. I brought you guys some samples today from Procure.
We have some shoe peg corn.
Yeah, some white shoe peg corn.
And some
secret
scent.
weapon.
Yes. Yeah. In Canada, we have a hard time finding white shoe peg corn. And you can't really go to the grocery store and get it. You can find it as a Potski fire corn in your local tackle shop. If you go across the state line, you're going to find white shoe peg corn. I recommend to go pick yourself up a crate, because it is one of the best types of bait you can use. Now, I do get asked a lot when I'm doing seminars, is like, hey, isn't corn bad for fish? I've heard that rumor before. So I've sourced out this information by 3 different biologists, one from Oregon, one from Washington, and one from British Columbia. And they all told me the same thing. If you give a fish a whole handful of corn and you chum up the water with it and they eat all of that, yes, it's going to plug up their system. I mean, if you give me 5 T-bone steaks and eat that in one sitting, I might try it, but I'm going to be plugged up in there, right? So can a fish process it? Yes, they can. They can pass it through the system. But what we're doing is we're not chumming the water. Right. We're putting one simple little cured kernel of corn on each hook of our kokanee lure. That is it. Mm-hmm. You don't actually want to overbait your lures because we just put all that effort into giving that lure its own action, right? Mm-hmm. Or to create action onto it. If you go ahead and weigh it down with too much bait, you're just defeating the purpose of it.
Right.
The reason we're adding bait is it's the last small little piece of detail that fish, and I've seen this on the water wolf camera that we're running, that fish will come up within an inch of that lure and it will actually swim side to side with that lure until something changes. Or if it has a scent that's a natural smell to them, like a krill, a shrimp, mm-hmm. That sort of smell, the kokanee is going to be used, like it's going to be familiar to them, so they're going to strike it. There's the other type of scent. So we have that's called an attractant scent. Now we have something called an irritant. You ever heard of using garlic when fishing? Ever wonder why?
I don't think I've ever used it.
Okay, so if you go into, like Canadian Tire and such, you'll see like some garlic marshmallows type of thing, right? Remember those? You probably use them as a kid, great for bait fishing, that sort of thing. Well, garlic isn't really attracting. Fish don't like the smell of garlic. Mm-hmm. They actually don't. They get mad at it. So what they do is they'll actually swat it or they'll bite it out of anger, out of aggression. So when your kokanee comes up and is smelling your gear, and when it picks up that smell of garlic or anise is another one, that's a really good strong irritant. Mm-hmm. The kokanee will actually strike your gear out of sheer just aggression versus like, hey, that's a familiar smell. It's like, no, that's not right. It's foreign. I'm going to hit it. Right. A sense of smell to a sockeye and to a kokanee is over 100 times greater than a bloodhound dog.
Wow.
Okay.
Crazy.
Think of this. Our Okanagan sockeye run over 1,200 kilometers from the mouth of the Columbia, and they make their way up to the Osuias Lake. 1,200 kilometers. They do that on one thing, the scent. They're the smell of their home waters is what brings them 1,200 kilometers.
Wow.
Okay. So
it's crazy.
It is. It's not. So if you think that, because kokanee, it's this freshwater sockeye, it's a landlocked sockeye.
Yeah.
If our sunscreen or maybe a little bit of gas that we dumped on our hands by accident when we're filling up the boat, or maybe that stinky bologna sandwich that we had for lunch doesn't make a difference, it does.
Right.
So because some guys wear gloves when they're kokanee fishing, right? When they're touching their tackle and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. I got the nickname from a couple of friends of mine, the glove guy, because if you ever come fishing with me, you'll see that I'm wearing always black gloves, like just those, like not latex, they're like the rubberized gloves.
Yep.
I do that for 2 reasons, because the cures and the scents that we're using are pretty hard on my hands, and I don't like to have pinker nails than my wife does. Right. But the other thing is it does help me not to get my scent onto the gear in which I'm using. Right. There's a lot of times that, you'll be fishing with a buddy and you'll be just catching fish and you'll be both using the same thing, trolling the same way, and you'll just be hammering fish, but your buddy's not. Usually what it comes down to is that he touched something or something's on his hand that got onto his lure. So, scent's a really, really, really important thing to take into consideration for it.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those things that most folks would probably brush off like, it's just a old rumor, right?
Yeah. We've, and the neat thing is that we've tried with just bait on one side of the boat, scented bait on the other side, and I'll tell you, I can show you my book. I mean, I record all our catch rates, and I do that for product testing as well to find out which ones are working best in certain conditions and such. Like I was talking about the irritants. One thing I found is that, in the morning, we get out there early in the morning, like the fish are feeding, they're still kind of hungry, but so a natural scent is used. They're willing to take it, but in the afternoon, when they're a little bit more lethargic or when the water temperature's up, you run something that is not, that's an irritant to them, they're just going to strike it. So using an irritant like a garlic, usually actually after 11 o'clock and every morning, I'll switch over to some sort of blend with a garlic, and you're going to get better results that way.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Wow.
Fishing's complicated, man.
It is.
Especially, after talking to Brian Chan and then now with you, it's like, it's not just, picking something out of your tackle box and throwing it out in the water. There's a lot more that goes into it than that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the great thing about kokanee fishing, and I don't one of the reasons that kokanee fishing is becoming so popular. I mean, it is the second most sought after game fish in British Columbia to rainbow trout. The reason for it is it is a family fishery, right? So, you can take your old forward fender gang troll, put on a wedding ring, and you're going to get success. Yeah, absolutely. Then you get guys like me that just become so finicky over it that I want to master it.
Yeah.
By using these different methods, they're going to definitely stack your odds in your favor. You're going to catch you will catch more fish, but you'll also learn how to target specifically larger fish too as well.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I noticed that if you want to take somebody out that hasn't fished before, if you take them to a good kokanee fishery, that's the place to do it.
That's right.
Like I've brought a couple people out last summer and they were just loving it. We had a successful day. It was sunshine. We were reeling in fish every 5 minutes and
So
it was
much
great.
fun.
Yeah.
And then you get to eat them.
Yeah, and they taste great. They're not the biggest fish in most cases, I think. Like, I don't know, we were catching them around 12, 15 inches.
Right.
But even those fish are like, they fight so hard.
Oh, for pound,
They're fun,
they exert so much energy when you're fighting them that compared to any other type of fish. They're so much fun. And, use ultralight gear and match it to it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, you reel in some of the big rainbows and sometimes they don't fight at all. They just
swim right up. Yeah. So. Yeah. The other thing about, like when you said 12 to 15 inches, throughout our province and throughout the Pacific Northwest, you'll find some fisheries that, you'll get the 12 to 13 inch fish.
Yeah.
And then some lakes you'll be producing 5-6 pound fish. And really, there's two things that come down to why the size of kokanee that they are. What first is genetics, and second is actually they are density dependent type of fish. Okay, so if you have a lot of fish in the system, you're going to have a lot of competition for food, so you're going to get smaller fish. Okay, so in systems where you're going to get in a healthy system, in a healthy lake, where there's less kokanee into it, you're going to find that the fish are bigger. Biologists actually use this information to actually better manage our fisheries. I'll use it right now, Wood Lake as an example. Okay, so before it crashed in about 2009, 2010, we were getting 3 to 3.5 pound kokanee there. Beautiful kokanee. Now, when I moved from the Kootenays, I was used to fishing Kookanoosa, pulling out 8-inch little kokanee because there's so many of them there. And it's also genetics. But after the crash, the fish actually got a little bit bigger. We had some bigger fish pulled out of there, and now the fish are all coming back. It's a 2-fish limit, and now what's happening is we're starting to see 12.5, 13-inch fish. Last spring, when we did the creel samples, we were getting 13.5-inch fish in April. Now we're getting 13-inch fish. So, and our catch rates have all skyrocketed. I mean, the other day our catch rate was 1 fish for every 6 minutes of fishing. Last year's catch rates was 1 fish in every 9 minutes of fishing. I keep these are my records. I always keep,
great.
Right?
So you're saying we might be able to catch more fish next year?
Yeah. So, what the biologists want to do now, they're going, okay, fish size is going down, catch rates are going up. It means that's a really healthy population, but there's a tipping point. Yeah. If we let that go and all the water in lake water conditions are good, spawning habitat's good, what's going to happen is all of a sudden we're going to have a fishery with only 8-inch fish.
Yep.
And that's not really that healthy either.
Right.
So now they're looking at, there is talk in the works of increasing possibly that limit or the time of the season.
Gotcha.
Right now we have an April 1st to August 31st, which I do hope that they keep it there because ice fishing on that lake shouldn't be, it's just not safe.
Right.
No,
And then
exactly.
when it comes to spawning times, we want to make sure the fish aren't interrupted to do their thing. But there's no harm in increasing that catch rate or the limit up to 3 fish,
right?
Because it's going to actually help towards conservation. In the States, sometimes you'll see fisheries that will have slot limits, and the reason those slot limits are there is like, hey, you're allowed 10 fish under X amount of inches. Well, that's because they're trying to thin out that category of fish to actually increase the health of their entire fishery.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot involved in the conservation and fisheries as well. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
So I just want to kind of ask you, all the old timers and you get a bunch of people that are like, just throw a gang troll out there with a wedding ring. Are you using gang trolls at all, or are you just straight Dodgers? And
well, here's the thing about gang trolls. They work, right? They'll work right now. I was at the shoreline last year with Jason Webster, a local kokanee biologist. And this is a true story. This still makes me laugh this day. So these two guys come off the lake, and they were just irate. They start yelling at Jason, says, we didn't catch any fish. Something's wrong with this lake. And, we've been fishing this lake all season, and all of a sudden it just died off. Something's going wrong. So Jason asked them, well, what are you using? And they pull out this 4-bladed Big Ford fender. Okay. So I asked the guy, how much weight you using? Well, maybe an ounce. I'm like, all right, so you're probably about 20 feet down. And we caught our limit. Within about 15 minutes, we had 4 fish in the boat. They're all at 55 feet. The other thing, the thing to consider is when you're using gang trolls, they're heavy, first of all. Okay. So when you're putting 100 feet of line out there, you're catching a pound and a half kokanee sometimes. You're not going to ever get that, hey, is the fish still on? Keep reeling. Is the fish I don't know, just keep reeling. Right. You can't really feel the fish. And a lot of times when those kokanee fight, they'll jump out of water, and then you've got all this metal that comes out of it, and it just rips the hook out. It actually can work against you.
Right.
The innovation and advancement in kokanee tackle in the last 10 years has been immense. Everyone's most serious kokanee anglers are going to ultralight gear, using small 4-inch light metal dodgers. We're fishing either off downriggers, or you can use inline weights. Downriggers are great because you can control the depths in which you're going to. Here's where using those large lake trolls, those are lake trolls, those big rotating flashers come in handy, is when the fish are scattered. Okay, so first thing in the spring, the fish can be scattered all throughout the surface and such, right? Those are excellent at that time of year. Remember those two guys who was telling me like they were getting upset? It's because they were fishing that same gear early spring when all those fish were on top, scattered a little bit. They was attracting the fish in, hitting them. But as soon as those fish actually start to school up and go deep again, that gear is becoming less effective. There's new lures out there now which have made it really effective for us that want to use those inline flashers. Mack's lure is one that puts out, it's called a flashlight blade. You can come in 2, 3, or 4 bladed rotating flashers, but they're actually made from a plastic versus a metal. So the neat part is when you get a fish on, you can actually still feel the fish. I like to take sometimes my fly rod out to like a stump lake up by Kamloops. Incredible fly fishing lake. Fish for rainbows in the morning. When the dead heat comes up, well, I know those kokanee are sitting there about 35 feet down. I'll use my Type 7 sink line, throw on a 2-blade flashlight, which is very, very, very light blades, and then I'll run a wedding ring behind it. Guess what? I got some nice rainbows, and I got some nice kokanee to take home.
Nice.
Perfect.
With the flashlight, can you put that in front of a Dodger hoochie, or is that too much?
No, absolutely. So, like I brought you guys one today, the 2-blade flashlight, and my recommendation is because we just had a huge runoff. So, we want to create as much flash and thump in the water without threatening those fish for them to think that there's a threat coming near them. So, the way we're going to do this is I'll run those 2-bladed flashlights right off my line. Then I'll run about another 6 inches down to my Dodger, and then to my leader, to my lure. And what that's doing is it's actually creating not just the thump from the back and forth of my Dodger, but now it's actually creating the oscillating rotation, that vibration in the water that's actually mimicking a whole school of fish running through the water. So when the water clarity is a lot less, creating more flash and more thump in the water to attract them in is going to put your odds in your favor. So running a setup like that with those 2 blades in the front, 6 inches, your Dodger, and then your lure is going to definitely help you out. In the summertime, I probably won't do that so much because of water clarity. You don't need to.
Right.
I mean, these fish are going to see your gear sometimes 30, 40 feet away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as colors go, are you, there's obviously a lot of pinks and oranges. Does that change, like as you go down in the summer and find that thermocline, are you still using pinks and oranges, or do you have to switch it up?
Really good question, because that does make a difference. So like I was saying earlier, is like kokanee are really fickle fish. What color that worked one day may not work the next day. It can actually change within the minute. You see a lot of bright colors, definitely, like pinks, chartreuses, oranges. There's actually a reason for that. And, first of all, red really stands out. Pink really stands out as a bright. It's really unnatural for them. So it's a bright color coming through the zone. It's their personal space. They get kind of ticked off at and they hit it. But the other reason is that as you further go down the water column, UV light can only penetrate so far. So without a UV lure, going down about 20 feet without any fluorescent UV colored type of lure, it'll actually turn to a shade of gray. Okay, so it'll actually dissipate. So if you're going to go any deeper, you're going to want to go to like your oranges, your reds, your greens, your purples, and then your blues. So the deeper you go down. The nice thing is about when you're going to be using UV colors, you can double that. So you can go 40, 50 feet down using a pink UV lure, and it's still going to stand out because it's using UV light rays.
Right.
But as the fish are swimming horizontal to it, and it's about 80 feet off from it, it's actually still seeing gray because it's now horizontal away from it, right? Because of visibility from the water. So as that fish is swimming up to it and it gets within 20 feet of it, all of a sudden that shade of gray goes pink to a pink. The fish kind of gets ticked off and it comes in and take a little bit closer look where it attacks your gear. So having those brighter colors, that's my interpretation and why they work a lot better that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think you touched on speeds.
Yeah.
So it's earlier.
So yeah, trolling speeds. If I were to actually give 2 tips to people, like when people say, Danny, if you can give me 2 things that I could take back that will help me become a better kokanee angler, it's speed and leader lengths. So we talked about the leader lengths. Speed is also the other crucial part of it. So speed, first thing in the springtime when that ice just comes off or when that water temperature is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll troll 0.8 miles per hour. Yeah. Like slow.
So I noticed too that a lot of people out there that are complaining about not catching fish are using their 2-stroke, 8 or 10 horse, and they can't get slow enough. They're going like 3 miles an hour as slow as it goes.
Their Ford fenders troll like surfing on the back, right?
Yeah,
that's right. So when I first got into kokanee fishing, my mop bucket had more miles on it than my motor did. You want to slow your boat down. 0.8 miles per hour is where you're starting, is usually where you're starting. Yeah, your 2-stroke 9.9 is going to definitely troll fast on a 12-foot boat. So how do you figure out your speed? Well, they've got an app for that. There's where we almost all of us have smartphones these days, so you don't have to go buy a big fancy sonar unit with a GPS chart plotter. I mean, yes, they are nice; they'll help you put more fish in your boat, but just get a simple app, tell your speed, or if you got a little Garmin unit in your car, bring it along, and really, really hone in on your speed. So 0.8 is where I usually start off early season, and then ideally you're going to go between 1.3 to 1.6. That's kind of where the optimum area is. If you want to sacrifice less smaller fish and go after target larger fish, you're actually going to, there's 2 things you can do is you can drop your gear below the school because those larger fish will actually tend to hold just at the bottom of the school, and then actually bump your trolling speeds up to 1.8, sometimes up to 2 miles an hour. And those larger fish are actually going to come, and you're not going to catch as many fish, but when you're actually pursuing those larger fish, you're going to get them on a reaction hit that's going to be going a little bit faster. Yeah.
So many things to consider. I'm glad we're recording this.
Yeah, exactly. So you take some notes there.
Yeah, I got my notepad, and we've got all the demos. You brought some awesome Dodgers in there as well. I wonder if we should touch on that. So you have a Max Dodger, or Sling Blade, sorry.
Yeah, so the Max Lure Sling Blade. So Max Lure just recently bought out Shasta Tackle, and one of the really cool parts about that is that they acquired one of the most popular. It probably is the most popular kokanee Dodger in the Pacific Northwest, and that's the Sling Blade Dodger. It comes in a 4-inch and a 6-inch, and actually comes up to a larger one, like an 8, just over 8 inches for sockeye. The great thing about these Dodgers are made of light stainless metal, and you can actually bend them, which is tuning them. So if you're going to go to that point, like I was talking about, that 0.8, that's slow. That takes a lot to get your gear to move back and forth. So these sling blades, you can actually bend and actually put like a big cup into it. And when you're trolling 0.8 miles per hour, it'll actually swing your gear back and forth really nicely. But then also too is when I was talking about pursuing those larger kokanee, you can take that, straighten it right back out, go up closer to 2 miles per hour, and it's still going to transmit the proper action without actually rolling. The other Dodger that we have here is called the Max Lure Double D Dodger. And this is a really cool Dodger because you see some guys out there using side planers. Well, in a small boat, it's hard to have side planers. Well, on the Double D Dodger, there's actually 5 holes at the top of it. If you want your gear to go way off to the right, you just, on the back of your Dodger, there's actually a little diagram that shows put it in this hole and it'll shoot off to the right. So what you're going to do is when you're trolling through the fish, and they're up in that upper 20 feet of water, they're going to scatter around your boat. Well, if you put that hole or that your your line in that hole, you're going to swing your gear out to where those fish are going to go. And guess what? You just put that gear in that fish's face and you're going to get better results onto it. It's really great too when guys like to stack their downriggers. So I'll put one line straight off the downrigger, then I'll put a double D Dodger and just offset a little bit. Guess what? I'm not getting tangled up anymore either, right?
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
It's that way when I can run 2 downriggers and I can still fish with four rods in the boat and not get tangled up. The double D also, what it does is it has a patented, very, very unique stop and go action. You were just telling me earlier that you were doing some S turns, like, hey, if I turn left and turn right, it actually creates your gear to stop and go back and stop and go back again. Well, that's what the double D Dodger does, is it comes up, swings up, stalls out, and it drops. And it gives that little erratic action to your lure, which gets that fish to really zone in and strike on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to try that one.
Yeah. We can talk a little bit about I can give you a couple tips on trolling techniques too.
Yeah.
Just because we're just talking about it, there's early in the morning, that sun's on the horizon. If you're trolling towards the sun and your face is towards the sun, that sun's not actually hitting against your flashers or your dodgers. So trolling with the sun always at your back is going to put the odds in your favor, right? So because what's going to do is it's going to actually hit your flashers and your dodgers to give the most maximum flash that you need back onto it. The other thing that you want to do is like we're talking about big ass turns, creating that type of action. But sometimes you'll get into fisheries that it's too busy to be able to do that. You might be crossing lines with other guys. So you can just simply troll along, click your motor into neutral, count 3 seconds, click it back in the drive, bite.
Right.
Okay. A kokanee likes to attack your gear just like how maybe a kitten likes to chase a piece of string. If you just run a piece of string across the floor, the kitten's going to sit there and look at it. But if you put it there and you go stop, go stop, go stop, go stop, go with that piece of string, what's going to happen?
Yeah, the prey or predator instinct kicks in, right?
Kind of hops on it, right? That's the same thing with the kokanee.
Yeah.
When you're faced with winds, try not to troll. We call it uphill. Don't troll against the wind. Use it to your benefits. I mean, your trolling speeds are so crucial that if you're trolling against the wind, you can't control your speed. And also that slapping against the boat can actually really, really make that's loud underneath the water. So spend the time, troll or zip back up to the top of the lake and then troll back down with your wind. You'll be able to throw another drift sock or bucket or two out the back to slow you down, whatever you need to do. But that's going to help you definitely
Nice.
Control your trolling speeds.
Do you think maybe this is more for fly fishing, but I always thought the fish know, like, if it's heading in the opposite direction, something's up. But maybe for trolling for kokanee and rainbow with bait fish and that kind of thing, I guess fish could be going any direction.
Kokanee are going to face really, they're going to be facing really where the food source is going to come into. So no matter what type of fish you're pursuing, when they feed, they want to burn as less amount of energy as possible, right? So if a wind is pushing to a south point, well, all that zooplankton is going to be pushing towards that area, right? So that's actually a good area that you're going to want to target. So these schools of fish will actually stage themselves where that feed will be pushing down to them. So they'll be actually facing towards the wind. So if you're trolling towards them, they're going to see your gear and they're going to actually be more apt to hit it. Right. That actually gives to a good point too, is like when you go to a lake, there are some certain things that you can do to be able to track down the fish, find out where they're at, not just by using your sonar, but lakes that have big deep pockets that have a quick contour, like a narrow contour into it, where current might be pushing into it. All that zooplankton is going to be pushed into there. So that might be an area that you want to target. When I go kokanee fishing, no matter what water body I'm going to, if I know I'm going fishing on Saturday, I'm looking at what the wind's doing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm not too much worried about what's happening on the day I'm fishing, because if it's been blowing to the north for the last 3 days, where's all that feed going to be?
Yeah,
at the north, right? So that's the area of the lake I'm going to be targeting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a few things that we could all be doing, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us aren't.
Definitely.
Just showing up, right?
Yeah. That's all part of it too, I guess, is just getting out there and slowly figure these things out, right?
And I think that goes back to the point of, if you're getting into fishing or you want to get your family out there, kokanee's a good species to go for, because even if you can't, dial it in that much, you're probably still going to have some success on a...
Oh, that's right. my recommendation is people, so if you really want to pick it up, find a fishery that has a lot of fish onto it. Like for us, it's Wood Lake. I mean, anyone is going to go out there and catch fish, but play around. Just that's how I learned. It's like, okay, well, this is working. What else is going to work? Hey, if I do this different, I mean, don't be scared to experiment. Have fun with it. That's the most important thing, right? And then if you practice in an area that you know that you're going to get fish, you're going to get results, and fine tune your skills, you're going to be able to take that same skill set that you just learned and apply it to a tougher lake. Like, I'll give you a lake in the area. I keep mentioning Stump Lake. That's a really, really, really tough kokanee fishery. I mean, some days you'll get some fish in there, but the average kokanee in there, in my experience, is 2.5 to 3.5 pounds. So my wife caught a nice 5.5 pound kokanee out there last summer. Wow! And we had to fish hard for it. But all we did is we just applied the tactics we learned from that fishery, like Wood Lake. Yep. We went up there and we knew, hey, these are bigger fish. They're not as abundant. We need to up our trolling speeds. We need to give them something with more of a reaction hit. Let's take them off by adding some garlic into it. And guess what? We start getting into some fish.
Cool.
Right.
Awesome. So when you get all these fish and the limit for us is pretty small here, but you go out for any number of weeks and you gather a bunch, and are you smoking them, or what's your favorite recipes?
This is the nice thing is like, I mean, it's fun to catch them, but it's even funner to eat them. Yeah. I mean, we're eating sockeye, right? So, our fish limit here at Wood Lake's 2, but our region limit's 5 per day, right? So if you go up to Monty Lake, you can catch 5 fish. You can go camping for the weekend. You're allowed your possession limit of two daily quotas. That's a pretty nice table fare. So smoking kokanee is really, really good. I like to take the fish that I catch later season, like into like July. I like to smoke those because you'll start to kind of adapt sometimes. I don't really call it a muddy flavor, but more of a fishy flavor. That's because they're eating so much zooplankton and they're in that algae blooms and such. So if you're smoking them and you're getting I like a dry brine, but it's not really much. It's like 80% brown sugar and then 20% pickling salt and whatever spices you want, and then just smoke it for 8 hours and you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
Another one of our favorite ways to enjoy it is just take maple syrup and then just add do maybe 3 parts maple syrup and then 1 part soy sauce, add some garlic onto her, marinate your kokanee fillets in that, and then throw them on broil in the oven, and it's just going to caramelize up. It's like a teriyaki taste. It's so good.
That sounds good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smoked kokanee, you can't beat that.
No, that's definitely one of my favorites.
Candy.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I guess just to touch on, rainbows, if you, like last weekend, we caught our limit. Like you said, we don't want to keep going for kokanee just for the sake of it. So you throw something out there for rainbow. Maybe we can get into this at a different podcast, but like, what are the key differences when you switch over? I don't think you're really running the gang trolls and the Dodgers. It seems like you're more running just plugs and bucktails and that kind of thing.
Right. So when you're in a fishery that you've got both a good healthy fishery with kokanee and rainbow trout, one thing you can do when you're just from the time you start fishing is instead of using a lure with no action like a hoochie, switch over to that wiggle hooch I was telling you about. Because all it's doing is it's mimicking 2 things. It's creating that erratic action that's going to take off that kokanee, but you can bump up your trolling speeds a little bit. You're going to pursue a little bit bigger kokanee, but you're also going to start getting those rainbow trout interested because now they think, hey, that's an injured little bait fish that I'm going to come in and I'm going to hit, right? On Stump Lake out in Kamloops, that's actually one method we do because there's some beautiful rainbow trout on there that you can catch on the same gear, your Dodger, and any type of reaction lure like a small plug or a wiggle hoochie or a small spoon, and the trout will hit it. So I still use Dodgers a lot of the times when trout fishing, but I'm just making sure I'm using a Dodger that can go up to that 2 miles per hour type of speed. Okay. Right. So let's say, for example, a Suyas Lake and a Skaha Lake. We are spoiled with these lakes, and it's kind of one of the most underrated fisheries, I would say, in the South Okanagan or Southern Interior, is because they have so much sockeye fry in there, right? So they're also, Skaha Lake is a fantastic kokanee fishery. So we'll go out there and you're allowed 5 kokanee each. We'll get our kokanee, and now what we're going to do is we're going to flip over and we're going to start going for rainbows. And all we're going to do is we're going to take off, say we're just using a simple small blade kokanee hoochie, take that off, put on a wiggle hoochie or an apex lure. We're going to bump our trolling speeds up to close to 2 miles per hour. Now that small little plug, that little apex or wiggle hoochie is now mimicking a sockeye fry. And these rainbows are seeing the dodger. They're feeling, because that dodger is not just made for kokanee, it's made for trout as well.
Oh, okay.
They're feeling it. They think it's another fish chasing this fry or this other injured bay fish, and they'll come in and they'll attack it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, the transition plan, because sometimes it doesn't take too long to get your limit with kokanee, so to have that plan to switch over to rainbows,
That's right.
and you got a full day ahead of you and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
The other nice thing is that in the Okanagan, when we are fishing a fishery like Wood Lake, you've got your 2 fish limit. Your region quota or your region limit is 5 fish a day.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go through that channel and you can go catch another 2 fish, because Kalamalka Lake is a 2 fish limit.
Oh, okay.
Wood Lake, and I have talked to conservation officers.
Yep.
If they just ask, do us a favor and take the hard, just be considerate. Take a couple pictures of you with your 2 fish on Wood Lake.
Right.
And then when you go over to Cal Lake, take a couple pictures. So that way when you can just show us, say, okay, you're not cheating the system, right?
Yeah.
So, there's been days where my wife and I, we fished Cal Lake. We were lake trout fishing. We also threw out some kokanee gear, caught 2 nice kokanee. Then we were actually staying the night up at Monty Lake. Well, we got 2 fish. We went back out, got 3 more fish for a good dinner. That's your region limit. That's your limit. Your daily limit's 5 fish. So understanding those regulations, it doesn't mean you're done for the day. You can go to another lake.
Yep.
But hey, I also like to target rainbow trout. So like you said, flip out a little bit of the gear, up your trolling speeds, and go at her.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good tip too.
For sure.
Sometimes those regs can be, you need to look at not really between the lines, but they can be confusing.
Oh yeah.
The deer limits and the bag limits and the hunting regulations, like they have to write out an actual example of, because it can get pretty complex. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know. Even when we're going out, I always like to glance at the regs again just to make sure. Because even if you feel like you're 100% sure, sometimes you're like, I should look at that one more time just to make sure.
Yeah, and there's in-season changes too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I always recommend guys at least, once a week go pop on to the ministry website and check out like in-season changes, see what's going on. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not just shutting down fisheries, like, oh, that's opened up, let's go,
Yeah.
Those in-season changes are, we live in a desert area. If there's water temperatures that increase, they might actually have to shut down a fishery real quick, right? So looking at those are really important. My recommendation to that too is like, if guys don't understand a regulation, our conservation officers in BC are fantastic. They're ambassadors for us. We can go and ask them. Every time I've gone to a CEO and talked to them, I've had more great conversations and I've learned more. And if they don't know the answer or know the exact definition, they're going to help you source that out. They are there to help us.
Yeah, I think some guys might be intimidated by them, you know what I mean, and try and stay away from them. But the purpose of them being there is to help you out, right?
That's right. It's kind of, back in the day, they were game wardens, right? Because they're there to help us, as ambassadors of the sport. And I mean, they do a fantastic job. Unfortunately, they're not as abundant as they used to be.
Yeah. So
anything we can do to help make their jobs better by just doing our research and giving a courtesy phone call to make sure that, hey, if I'm being checked, I'm up to the rules and regulations. And then you can always help share that information with friends.
Yeah, for sure. Good.
Awesome.
Well, I don't know where that hour went, but we just blasted through an hour already.
Yeah. I like it. We could sit here all night.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the thing. We don't want to take all your secrets in one day.
Yeah. I think we should definitely do a part 2 of fishing as the seasons kind of change here.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if we get a sockeye fishery, because a lot of this information actually just transfers right over to sockeye. Right. And that's a fantastic fishery in the South Okanagan.
Good.
Awesome.
Good. So before we wrap it up, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, just you guys are doing a fantastic job. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm a 3-year hunter myself, so I've been really following the podcast. I've been learning a lot and living vicariously through your stories. And
awesome.
I remember getting my first deer and that feeling that you went through, and it's so much fun, and it's nice to have that. But cool. The other thing is that throw an invite out to anyone listening is they have any questions whatsoever fishing in BC or the Pacific Northwest. bcfishin.com is my website. Feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help. That's for sure.
Yeah. I can vouch for you on that one because I've sent you a couple emails and the responses I got back were just
Kelly,
everything I want to know, broken out, leaders, downriggers, gear, everything. So,
unreal.
No, that's good.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Yeah, for sure.
I love fishing, but I love sharing fishing just as much. So
yeah,
that's good.
That's awesome.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thanks a lot for coming in, and I still can't believe that was an hour. That just blew by, but unfortunately I got to get out of here. So
we'll
thanks.
have you back for sure.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
And before we go, what's the website where people can track you down?
It's BC Fishin, so BC Fish, then the letter N.com.
Easy.
Awesome.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.